Okay, this is Guru Rasa talking about this time. This is the sixth podcast in this series of me preaching and teaching. This is about sexuality. Why the new religion that I espouse does not look upon sex as sin, except abusive sex. Sex in general is not a sin. Why does Christianity and some other religions consider sex to be a sin? Because the religions that we know of that are today controlling the world, not Wicca, not paganism, but the traditional religions, uh, Catholic, Christian, Catholic, Protestant, Jewish, Muslim, um, I'm trying to think what else are the mainstream religions. Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, the Anabaptists. Well, those are Protestants. Anyway, those are some of the main ones. Why do they consider sex to be a sin? Because they are all patriarchal. They are all patriarchal, and they contain within themselves the double standard. So they invented this morality concerning sex in order to control women. 99% of it is to control women. Now, lately it has the standards have changed, and men have been convicted for their sexual abuse, for their what they call immorality, for their sexual behavior, for their, being abusive to women in the job areas, in the job market, and demanding sex for jobs and all stuff like that, demanding their secretary, for instance, to have sex with them, and that's taboo, legally speaking. So the reason that it has been changing. All right, as I said, these morality, so-called morality laws, were created by men, just as these religions were. All the religions in the ancient days were matriarchal, and when the men eventually took over and created patriarchy, they took over the religions and they changed them into patriarchy. So they changed a mother god into a father god. They changed priestesses into priests with robes like women used to wear, glamorous, beautiful robes. They put themselves in authority. They took away the authority from the women. They took the Wiccans and they tortured them and burned them to death and killed them all, because they were leaders. They were spiritual leaders. They didn't want any spiritual leaders. The Wiccans did not have that type of repressive uh, morality. Morality is this type of sexual morality is an invention. It's an invention of men. Meanwhile, they did what they wanted to. What was good for the goose, what was bad for the goose was good for the gander. The gander did whatever he wanted. They called the men virile. Boys will be boys, but women were slut-shamed for sexual behavior. You are not to take this seriously, these invented morality laws. We're all against women. I can't get into everything they did against women right now. I'm not mentally ready to think about all that. I'm just saying that the sexuality is not to be, the sexual morality that men created is not to be taken seriously. And in my religion, it is not taken seriously. Homosexuality is not a sin. Lesbianism is not a sin. Bisexuality is not a sin. Fornication is not a sin. Adultery is not a sin unless God says it is. You know, it's, again, maybe it is, there's various things, you know, you could be committing adultery and it might be wrong because you did promise your faithfulness to your spouse. You did promise. And even when you have a steady boyfriend or girlfriend, if you promise them to be faithful and then you're not faithful, that might be a transgression of some sort. But it's not automatic. It's between you and God. God is the judge. If you do something wrong in your marriage, if God judges it to be wrong, then it's wrong. If God doesn't judge it to be wrong, it's not wrong. Because I heard a man say once, sometimes you gotta commit adultery, he says. You have to, he says. And I know what he meant. He meant it was supposed to be funny, but it wasn't, you know, it was meant to be taken a certain way. It's like there are certain conditions under which people commit adultery that God looks the other way, so to speak. Okay, masturbation certainly is not a sin. I mean, it's between you and your hand and God. What's it got to do with anybody else? And yet these priests will sit in a confessional booth, and in my day I've done a lot of confessions. They will sit in a confession booth, and they will, meanwhile, these homosexual priests who are doing sex with other men, and some of them are pedophiles, they will tell you, you can't masturbate, you can't fornicate, and you better say 10 Hail Marys and 10 Our Fathers if you did, to make up for your sin. You're a sinner. You know, this is the hypocrisy is great. The hypocrisy in the Catholic Church is monumental. That's why I can't, you know, they say people look at my pictures and my frame of reference, and my frame of reference, uh, I talk a lot about saints, I talk a lot about Catholic precepts, and they say, oh, you're a Catholic. No, well, I used to be a Catholic, but I have rejected all the stuff I don't agree with, the stuff I don't believe in, the stuff I don't want from the Catholic Church. I certainly reject all their misogyny. I reject the way they demand that priests cannot marry. I do not accept their concept of the Holy Trinity. The Holy Trinity to me is God the Mother, God the Creation, and God the Holy Spirit. I have a different conception of God. I do not worship Jesus as the one and only God, the second person of the Holy Trinity. Yes, he's an incarnation of God. So is the Holy Virgin an incarnation of God. So is Ramakrishna an incarnation of God. Many saints are incarnations of God. Some people think I'm an incarnation of God, and I don't know if I am or not, but if I am, God knows. I am what God says I am, nothing more and nothing less. Maybe I am, maybe I'm not. It's up to God to know. And we don't know. How can you prove Ramakrishna was an avatar? An avatar is an incarnation. Well, a lot of people believe it. Some people don't know. You know, his number one disciple, Vivekananda, said he didn't know if Ramakrishna was an avatar or not. But he was his number one disciple, but he said he didn't know. And it was a woman nun, a religious woman of God, who declared he was. And then they called together a conference, and all these greatest gurus of that time came together, all of them, to examine him. And in the end, they decided, yes, he's an avatar. So it was their observation and their opinion that he was, but it all got started with this woman. I think they called her the Bhairavi. She was like a nun, like a Buddhist, or not a Buddhist, a Hindu nun, who was very admired Ramakrishna greatly. My outlook on religion is similar to Ramakrishna's. Ramakrishna practiced several different religions, and he practiced them to the hilt. First, he was a worshiper of Mother Kali, a very fervent worshiper, and he became an absolute perfect Christian. and Jesus appeared to him and entered into him, he became a practitioner of non-duality. He had a different Totopuri, I think, was his guru for that. Then he had another devotion for the baby Krishna, and he mastered that and became a proficient in that. And he even became a Muslim and became a proficient Muslim. Oh, how he did all that, I have no idea, but I guess that was his thing. So how am I similar to him? In that I accept all these religions. See, to me, God is infinity. God is infinity. There's no one perfect religion. Let's review who and what God is. God is not just a creator. God did not create the earth and live separately from not only the earth, but the universe. God did not just create the universe and step apart from it. God is the universe. God and her creation are one. God is the infinite universe in the physical and the infinite universe in the spiritual. The physical and the metaphysical. The physical and the non-physical. The universe is infinite. It never always was, always will be. We are in a place of time. The universe is not. It always was, always will be. And God is the universe. God is the spirit, the infinite spirit. So my vision of God is very different from a Catholic, isn't it? They say God is a person. Most Christian religions call God a person. The Hindu religion has a lot of gods. The pagans have had. The Romans and the Greeks had a lot of gods. These are symbols. These are symbols. You know, Krishna, Durga, Kali are symbols. Ganesh is a symbol, God and prosperity. There's Shiva and Shakti are symbols of God. Shiva is the male, Shakti is the female. She's like the Holy Spirit. He's supposed to be, you know, a certain way, and she's supposed to be a certain way. She's supposed to be like the energy, and he's the matter. He's matter, he's physical, and she's the energy, kind of like that. Then there's the Shiva Lingam. They worship God through the lingam and the yani. The lingam is really a penis, and the yani is a vagina. And they have statues of the lingam and the yani. These are symbols of God's fertility, God creating with the symbols of male and female. There's many other names in the Hindu pantheon. And then in Greek mythology, you know, the gods were kind of like supernatural people, you know. And then there's the agricultural religions. There's the ones who worship God through agriculture, and there were pagans who were like that, Druids, pagans and Wiccans. And to them, God was a mother god. Well, certainly the Wiccans. And to the Indians, American Indians, the Great Spirit, there's the Great Spirit over all. Some people worship God as the sun, the Egyptians. Some people worship God as different fetishes, different totems. In the totems, they have symbols of God. There are the nomads who have reindeer. They have a sacred reindeer they choose for every generation, or, you know, reindeer don't live as long as humans, but they have certain reindeer that become the designated sacred reindeer for the family, and they pray to that reindeer. That reindeer does not do any work. It's kept close to the tent, and through that reindeer, they believe they are protected. They feel their family is protected. Their children are protected. There's many, many different ways of worshiping God, and God accepts all ways of worship. As long as a person is sincere and has a humble heart, that is what God wants. It's the heart that God judges you by, and your love. You're caring for others, you're loving others. Love thy neighbor as thyself, love God with all your heart, soul, and mind, and love thy neighbor as thyself. That's the primary laws that in Christianity that we agree with in my new religion. We agree with that. Love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as yourself. We love our neighbor. But now, mind you, they say, somebody asked Jesus, who is my neighbor? And Jesus gave a parable about the man who was robbed by bandits and thrown half dead on the road, and a Levite passed him by, and another Orthodox Jew passed him by on the other side of the road and didn't bother to help him. And then a Samaritan came by and helped him. And the Samaritan covered his wounds with oil and wine, and cleansed them with oil and wine, soothed them with oil and cleansed them with wine, I guess, because alcohol will cleanse your wounds. And then he took him to an inn and left him there and told overnight, he was there overnight with the wounded man. And then he told the innkeeper, on my way back, any expenses that incurred, I will pay them. Just take care of this man. So the neighbor, your good neighbor, what was Jesus saying? Who is the neighbor? The neighbor is the good person who helps you. And to the good person, anyone in need of help is your neighbor. So you care about your neighbor, you take care of your neighbor. But these Christian religions and many other religions are not treating homosexuals as their neighbor. They're not treating gay people, lesbians, transvestites, transsexuals as their neighbor. They're not treating women in the adult trade, prostitutes, as their neighbor. They're not treating stripteasers as their neighbor. They're not treating pole dancers and topless dancers as their neighbor. They are rejecting these people. They are not treating cougars as their neighbor. They are not treating women who date many men and have sex with a variety of men as their neighbor. They're only treating those people they approve of as their neighbor. And they are rejecting everyone else. But my religion, I accept all these people as my neighbor, and we are in fellowship. You are not rejected. You are not looked down upon. I'm one of you. I'm one of you that they look down upon. They look down on me and they look down on you. But I don't look down on you, and hopefully you don't look down on me. So we are in fellowship. There's an interesting anecdote that comes out of the Hindu literature. There was a monk who lived in a poor area, in a hut, and across from him, not very far within his vision, lived a prostitute. He looked at her hut and he said, "Oh, that dirty prostitute. She's vile, she's sinful. I wish she would move. I can't stand the sight of her." And she looked at him and his hut and she said, "Wow, I wish I could be like him. I wish I could be holy and righteous and clean like him. But I don't have," she didn't have the opportunity to be like him. She had to work at her business, which she worked at. So now they both died, and a bunch of demons came and took that monk to hell. And a bunch of angels, a group of angels, came and picked up that poor prostitute and took her to heaven. Now you tell me why. I have had many religious men who judged me, priests, who I wrote to, who judged me. See, I can read minds. I can channel. Channel is mind reading. And there's been more than one, but I'm just going to give one example. There was a priest who I liked very much because he spoke very much against the Inquisition. He spoke very much against those who hurt others, and he said they condemned these women for sexuality, and he said that's projection. They projected their own sins or their own whatever they projected onto these women. So I said, this guy might be somebody I could be friends with. And I wrote him and I sent him all my, a large, like 100 Xerox copies of my publicity. And I said, I am the stripper for God. Let's talk. Let's communicate. I got no answer, but I read his mind. And he said, oh, you dirty woman. Oh, you evil woman. You see, God gave me gifts from the Holy Spirit where I can read minds because that protects me. That protects me from people. And so that I know their minds and their hearts. I know whether they are a friend or whether they are against me, or whether they despise me or scorn me or look down on me. People don't realize that, but I know what they're thinking about me. As soon as we're in communication and I meditate on them, or even if I don't meditate on them, I sometimes see them in a dream, and I see what they're thinking about me in a dream. So they can't hide their feelings and thoughts from me if I want to see them. Even sometimes I don't ask God, I don't meditate, I don't try to figure it out. I just see it. It just comes to me. I just hear their thoughts. I hear their feelings and their thoughts. It just happens without my trying. It's just a gift of God, I guess. You could say it's natural. You could say it's a gift. I don't know. Maybe some of it is of God, some of it is natural. All right, now let's talk about homosexuality and lesbianism. These are completely normal, natural states. A certain percentage of people are born either homosexual or lesbian. Who said it was a sin? Who said it was against God? The patriarchs invented it. Recently, I saw Mother Angelica, a gay man, called her up and said, I'm a Catholic, and how can I be a Catholic and gay at the same time? And she said, basically, you cannot be she said, to be a practicing gay person and a Catholic is impossible. He said, because it is a grave sin and you cannot offend God and consider yourself a Catholic, so in so many words. And then she gave him a long lecture. And I love Mother Angelica. I mean, I love her. But she's a brainwashed Catholic. She could never deviate from the party line. So I think she really believed what she was saying, but she was wrong, because it is not a grievous sin. It is not. It's something that a person cannot control. It is not a choice. Being gay or lesbian or bisexual is not a choice. A person is that way. Either they're born that way, or like Jesus said, some are created. Well, they're created by sexual abuse. When the father or a man sexually abuses a son, sometimes it turns him in that direction, partially or fully. So I am told. So I am told by the men themselves. As far as lesbianism, someday all women will be lesbians because there will be no more men. They'll have no choice who to love. There will only be women because human men are going extinct. Now, check out Dr. Bryan Sykes' book that was published in 2004, based on research by the world's greatest geneticist from Oxford University, Dr. Bryan Sykes. Adam's Curse, A Future Without Men. Adam's Curse, A Future Without Men. I studied the book. I got it on an audio tape because when I went to check it out, I was having I've had severe at times trouble with my eyes, and at that time I could not read books. I was my eyesight was really bad, and my eyesight has been corrected through surgery. It's not 100% perfect, but I can see 20/20 far away. But I still have floaters. Whatever, that's a whole different issue. So, so Dr. Bryan Sykes said, you know, there will be no more men. So he said there will be two women parenting. He said you can take. He didn't mention sperm being frozen. He didn't mention that. But he mentioned you can take 23 chromosomes from one egg of a woman and insert them in the other egg of a woman, and you will have two women. It won't be a cloning of one woman, because the cloning uh, is not the best idea, because you can have the traits, inbred traits can come up from cloning a woman. You can do it that way. You can clone her. But he said, basically it's better to have two parents, because you have the genetics, or that's why you can't marry your relatives. That's inbreeding because of the genetics, because you have these bad traits that come up from intermarriage, marrying relatives, that is. So two women, you take 23 chromosomes from one egg and put it into the egg of another woman, and you have two women parents. But all the offspring are women. There's no more Y chromosome. The Y chromosome makes a man. The Y chromosome is crumbling. So there will be no more patriarchy. Patriarchy is doomed. And right now we are on the cusp, or the beginning of matriarchy. When the women's movement started during the time of Emmeline Pankhurst and her daughters and her followers at the beginning of the 20th century, that was the beginning of matriarchy. And then the men started the World War I, and that curtailed it. That ended the first wave of the feminist movement. And then the second wave of the feminist movement was Betty Friedan with her book, The Feminine Mystique, where she said, they're brainwashing and preparing us to be Stepford wives, so to speak. The Stepford wives was not yet conceived then, but I'm just saying that as a good analogy. And she cited, the women's magazines were all training women and brainwashing women to act a certain way, to be good housewives, to be concerned only about the family and the home, not to have careers, not to try to be leaders, not to deviate from the role that patriarchs want us to be in. And then later, it was actually a man, I think, that wrote, pretty sure it was a man, the Stepford Wives, and they've made like 3 movies out of it, and I saw one of them. It was very interesting. So they invented all this morality to control women, whereas men could still do whatever they wanted to do, but women could not. Now, how does the homosexuality get into it? Because homosexuality is against men. To condemn homosexuality is against men. It's complicated. It's complicated. And I could present several theories. Homosexuality was part of the culture of the Greeks and Romans. The older men supposedly were mentors of younger men. They had relationships with younger men, which they called mentoring or being a benefactor. But the sex was involved. It was sexual. And it was other things besides sexual, like they're designated, it's like a sort of an adopted son became their kind of like a legal son, and sometimes they inherited property and money from them, I think. But so maybe they didn't judge and condemn homosexuality in that era, in that culture. In some Muslim cultures, men having sex with underage boys and even underage children is considered acceptable. It's part of their culture. Obviously, it's certainly not part of our culture. Why is homosexuality condemned? Probably because in the ancient, this is just a theory, I don't really know for sure, but they might have wanted in the old days, they wanted everybody to have fertility. The old Jews, the Orthodox Jews, or any kind of Jews, I guess, in those days, everybody had to be fertile. Everybody had to have children because they wanted to perpetuate their race. And so if you were infertile, it was considered that you were not blessed by God, maybe even cursed or condemned by God, and God rendered you infertile. So that Anne Catherine Emmerich tells the story of when Joachim was the name of the Saint Anne's husband. Saint Anne's husband. Saint Anne and Joachim did not have any children at this point. At one point, and he went to the rabbi for something. I forget what it was, for some holiday or to give some gift or do some ritual or something. And the rabbi condemned him and told him he was not favored by God, that he was not blessed by God because he was infertile. And he was so mortified, so ashamed and mortified that he went away. And he absented himself from St. Anne, and he went out in somewhere far away where he bewailed his fate, and he was very sorrowful, very, very sorrowful. And he stayed away for a long time. And then he came back, and they reunited and had a loving reunion. And through this loving reunion, they conceived the Holy Virgin. So it was a very blessed conception of the Holy Virgin Mary. Okay, so I'm bringing that up to say that, oh yes, and King David, he was they were having a religious parade, and I think it was the Ark of the Covenant was being carried maybe through the city, or some kind of something sacred was being carried through the city, and he was dancing and dancing with joy. And this girl nearby, I think it was one of his girlfriends, made fun of him and said, "You're making a fool out of yourself, dancing around like that." And in this, I think it's in the Bible, it says that he said that God would smite her for saying that and would render her infertile. So you see, in those days, fertility, certainly for the Jews, and I imagine for the other ancient cultures, our human race had not overpopulated the planet yet, and people were striving to increase their tribes, to increase, mind you, these are patriarchs, not matriarchs. So the patriarchs were striving to increase their tribe, to have workers and soldiers, because that would give them power. So obviously they needed fertility, and they needed women as breeders, and they needed men to breed and be fertile. And homosexuality would diminish the chances of having more children. So they wanted more children, so maybe they condemned homosexuality and said it was a sin because they wanted men to constantly impregnate women to perpetrate their tribe. That's one theory. There is a tremendous, horrible misconception about women in the adult trade being immoral. Women, for instance, the women, I belong to a group that met in a church. It was, I don't remember how I got wind of it, but it was called Prostitutes and Feminists. We had women from all walks of life in that group. We had women in the adult trade, strippers, pornographers, prostitutes, and we had professional women like we had a lawyer judge, a woman who was a lawyer judge in it, and Katie Millett, the famous feminist authoress, and there was a woman minister who was conducting the group, and she had initiated this whole thing. I don't remember all the particulars. This is talking a long time ago, the 70s. This was the 70s. We came to the conclusion all women are prostituted in a patriarchy. Nevertheless, the society, even though some people call marriage is a sort of an exalted form of prostitution, and I went on a TV show impersonating a prostitute. That there was a show where they had a prostitute was supposed to be there, but she backed out, and I'm the one that solicited her, but then she backed out and she didn't want to do it. She didn't want to do it. They were going to pay her $1,000 because nobody wants to do it. There was another madam, and she only spoke behind the screen. So I told them, I'll do it. I'll impersonate a prostitute, and I will change my appearance a little bit. And I was blonde at the time, but I wore a black wig and sunglasses, but everybody knew who I was. So anyway, it didn't matter. I just wanted to represent the women to help them. And when I was speaking about the subject, a woman said something, and I said, don't you understand that marriage is in patriarchy is a form of prostitution? And she looked startled, and I said, try to deprive your husband of sex and see if he'll continue supporting you. The deal is sex, isn't it? Yes, he'll support you, but you have to give him sex. If you deprive him of sex, he will not support you. So, it's a complicated subject. Everything is not all black and white. I mean, not all marriages are alike. But in patriarchy, basically, the woman gives her body to the man, and the man works and supports her in the family. And she has to breed. She has to have sex. She has to breed. She has to cook and clean, barefoot and pregnant. When feminism first started, they said they want to keep us barefoot and pregnant, going from the kitchen to the bedroom. Okay, a lot has changed. A lot has changed. We're moving toward matriarchy. We're moving toward matriarchy, bit by bit by bit. We're on our way. Matriarchy is inevitable. All the futurists say the future belongs to women. Okay, so now we're talking about the issue of men against women. Really, we're talking about men against women. All right, I have spoken a good amount on the subject. of what we are about, and I will be very happy to continue explaining the new religion, our point of view, how we don't look upon sex as a sin, except when it is abusive, how patriarchy has created this whole scenario of so-called sexual morality, which we do not agree with. Homosexuality is normal, natural. Lesbianism, bisexuality is normal and natural. People want to do transgender, that's their business, is between them and God. You want to be a transvestite, fine, go for it, be my guest. I have no opinion on it. It's what you want to do. It's your body, your need or desire, whatever. What else is there? The judgment, the condemnation of people for sexual behavior is patriarchal. It's completely wrong. It's falling, the axe is falling on their heads as much as it fell on the women in the past. They're getting condemned for their own behavior now, just as they condemned women, because matriarchy is coming back. So therefore, they're not protected the way they were through that smoke screen that patriarchy put up in front of them, and their behavior, that smoke screen has been partially removed, and so they are being called to task for their misconducts, legitimate misconducts, not sexual harassment and using sex, in the job and all that. That's harassment. That's wrong. Rape and all that. They're being called to task. So this will be continued, and I bless you and I love you. Go in peace to love and serve God, and be at peace. We will continue on number 7.